My fellow citizens of all nations, right now I'm going to talk about Vepkhistkaosani by Shota Rustaveli, or in other words, The Knight in the Panther Skin. Now, this work is written in 13th century, and there is a thing that we should have in mind. It is a poetry, and it is over 300 pages worth of work. Intellectually, it is very challenging something to do, and from correct standards, if we were to look at this work and think, well, could we write something like this? Just write something like this. It would be challenging and beyond extreme. Difficulty of the challenge would be beyond extreme. And there is also the specific thing about this work, which is that it is completely different universe. And the main heroes of this work are Arabs and Indians. And everybody speaks in Georgian. At the same time, the main characters have superhero-like power, and there is some sort of a sorcery as well. Basically, there is this person that can disappear and walk in front of people without them noticing that person. Basically, there is some sort of a magic as well involved in this work. Basically, it's a different universe invented by an author, and basically, the usually women have ridiculous amount of power here, especially in case of Arabs, but mostly even in India. In case the powerful men just simply obey the wishes of women without even thinking. Now, situation is very different in Arab world and in Indian world. In Arab world, we have a woman as a ruler. And we have basically a very interesting situation here, which represents the Georgian reality of that time when this work was written. Basically, the king has only daughter, and he has no male descendant. So he decides to give throne to his daughter, basically. And there is a discussion going on, and basically, I read it in Georgian, so I won't bother you reading it, what is said, but mostly it's explained that both of them, whether it would be male or female, are given birth by God, therefore they are equal, or in other words, like Lekulomis Astoria, it would be in Georgia, and so they are equal, so it doesn't matter. So that just like man can be a king, so woman can be a king. Because God gives birth to both of them. So it doesn't matter. They are absolutely equal. And now there is another thing as well, which is very specific. During the time, king of kings basically was Tamar. And her husband was just king, official title. Essentially, to compare to these days, it would be like president was Tamar and vice president was her husband. And now, I mentioned her and him and etc. Thing is that Georgian language doesn't differentiate gender. In Georgian language, there is no such thing as he, she, or it. There is just is, and you can easily spell. It's a very common thing in Georgia. Like you just speak without differentiating gender. Like you are speaking when you have a conversation in Georgian, you can easily be talking about other person without even knowing the gender of that person, because your language itself does not notice the gender, and you have to ask specifically if you want to know the gender of the person, what's the person's name. So if it's Maria, it's obviously that it's a woman, but if the name is kind of both other can have you have to be more specific. Is it male or female? Like you have to ask those things to differentiate it. So this is also the part of Georgian language. So it doesn't have this kind of things. And basically, Tinatin is her name. So let's remember her name right now. We have the Tinatin. And she becomes essentially, she's own descendant of the king. She becomes the king. So she becomes the king of all Arabs, the woman, in the world of Rustaveli. All Arabs are ruled by woman, and she is a king. This is what the Rustaveli decides. And she has the basically second person in Arab empire is Avtandil. and Avtandil secretly loves her. And that's the thing. Now let's go to the Indian world, and let me explain what happens in what's the situation in Indian Empire. Basically, in India there is 7 empires total. 6 is ruled by another king, one king, and the 7th is ruled by another king. And the person that ruled the 7th empire, that was independent from the 6 empires, basically 7 of them were Indian empires. In fact, 2 of them, because this 6 was united as just one. But the 7th king basically has a son, and he decides to join these 6 kingdoms to unite the entire India. So he does that. And during that period, basically, when this union happened, there was no other heir but the heir of that person from the 7th kingdom. And his name of his son was Tariel, and this is a very important name. So let's remember Tariel. So we have I'm going to mention 3 names. It would be Avtandil, Tariel, and Tinati. So Tariel is raised as the one that should inherit the throne, basically should inherit the entire United India. But the thing happens that the king and queen have a daughter, and her name, which is also important, is Nestandarajan. These 4 important names in the work. And surprisingly enough, the Tariel is Amirbar. Amirbar is basically a position which gives him absolute power over military. And at the same time, let's not forget that he is still the heir of the 7th from the 7th kingdom. So pretty much he has plenty of royal people that are loyal to him because of that. And in the 7th kingdom, still he's under his heavy influence because he's a heir of, regardless of his father who already died. Now Tariel and Nestandarajan also fell in love. But now the power situation is different, right? Nestandarajan is not a king, and neither she is going to become a one. Because her parents decide to invite basically a prince from neighboring country to become a king there. Now, Tariel doesn't care really about power, but what he cares about is Nestandarajan. So he cannot just let him marry to other person, right? And Nestandarajan is also very, very angry at Tariel because she kind of thinks that, he lied to me. And by the way, before that, Tariel goes to a huge war to prove his love to Nestandarajan. And this is the thing, like Nestandarajan has told him that you will prove me your love by going to that war and beating your enemies, risking your life. And he does it. Oh my God. Because of simply, she told him. And here is where critique of whether love comes. Rustaveli shows us these 2 main laws, and he very heavily subtly criticizes these people. And he also says that in Arabic language, it seems that, by the way, the author itself is also fluent in many languages and etc. But I don't know if it's true or not, but he just says it in the work that in Arabic language, the lover means kind of the person that is like a wild beast. Shmagia. Kind of very wild. Basically, his mind doesn't work properly. That's what a lover would be. So even though Tariel has a huge experience himself in other matters, military, etc., he blindly listens to whatever she wants. And she's a little princess born with golden spoon, and she doesn't have a lot of experience in the things, while Tariel has been in actual war and handles actual things. So he has more experience, but regardless of that, he is so blinded by her beauty and love he has toward her that he just obeys whatever she wants. She does, but basically because he could have done things better. And here's another thing that the author tries to show us: that you are your worst possible enemy. And he says that the author, that essentially your worst enemy cannot harm you the way you can harm yourself. Basically, that's what he's the heavy messages he gives us. the way you can, even your enemies cannot harm you the way you can harm yourself. And it is demonstrated by these two people. Basically, let me keep explaining what happened. Now, that Ariel kills that invited prince, starts revolt. And this is, by the way, what they planned. That Nissan Darjan and Ariel have planned this thing to basically to show it as a Ariel's rebellion. Like, why would this prince from another nation should become the ruler of Hindus when I'm here? So he actually starts a rebellion, and he calls the military and says that whoever are with me, come here. Let's fight. And huge number of people come, and he has his own castle and etc. So these two people actually start rebelling instead of doing a lot of other things smartly. And here's what happens: Ariel leaves Nisandarjan behind because this is what Nisandarjan wanted. But what happens is that the father understands what happened. Like, he realizes that Ariel is not the type of man to start rebellion. For this type he's not a power-hungry man, and has a lot of virtue. So he realized that was because they were lovers, his daughter and this man. Like, they just fell in love, and now they are fabricating this thing. This is just complete cover. And basically, what happens is that the one that raised Nisandarajan gets very angry because she will be killed, and she is also a sister of the king. King will kill her. So she punishes Nisandarajan very heavily and sends her by the sea, and sends her also to slaves with her. So it is her punishment. So Nisandarajan gets lost, and now Tariel also gathers his strongest men and chases after her. But basically, it's a very tragic story. The empire also collapses because the second man, we should have inherited the empire, runs after her lover, and Indians suffer because of that. Obviously, because now the enemy will invade, because that prince's father will invade that Tariel killed, and at the same time the king already lost his mind because of this tragedy. Because king raised both of them as very close people to him, as his children, essentially. And basically this whole thing develops. And eventually, Ariel cannot find him. You cannot find Nisandarajan. And eventually they find some sort of cave of Devis. Devis are like mystical creatures. They are not even human, I guess. So, and he loses basically all of his 400 and some men here that followed him to this chase to find the Nisandarajan to fight in Devs, and only the servant he's left with is Asmat. And this is basically where kind of main fundamental of the story is, because Tariel loses his mind. He becomes completely as a complete savage beast. He essentially, it's explained in the book that he has a superhuman power. He's literally a superhuman being. He kills the lion with a sword, and later basically basically there's a panther or tiger, I believe. Basically he sees in tiger or the creature Nistan Darajan, and basically he grabs it and wants to hug it because he hallucinates that it is Nistan Darajan. This is what happens to him, and he kills that creature single-handedly without using any sword on something. This is how strong he is. And basically what happens is later that he's in the territory of Arabs, and he's crying in front of the river, near the river. And this is where the person we mentioned, Avtandil, and is with his king, and they have the competition of hunting basically. And the king of Arabs wants to meet Ariel, and he sends his men, but Ariel kills his men, their men, etc. And the king of basically, by king of Arabs I mean all the father of Tinati. But the father is also referred to the king because he was old and etc. Out of respect. So basically, he was he was not in charge of anything. Like daughter was. But basically, the previous king of Arabs gets super angry, he's depressed, and etc. because of that thing. And this is when Tinatin invites Aftandil and tells him that, hey, I know that you love me. Like, this is like such an unusual thing. Like even in the Indian's case, basically, basically in Tariel's and Sandarjan's case, like the woman is the one that takes initiative, like, calls the man, come here, like calls on a date and tells them, and the men are just and these men are, by the way, beautiful beyond belief. Both this Tariel and Aftandil and this basically this four men are just ridiculously beautiful creatures. Like people just are attached to them, and they are just very strong, good-looking, and etc. people, almost inhumanly beautiful people. And basically, Tinatin tells him that, hey, I know that you love me, and basically invites him and tells him that, okay, now you have to prove me that you love me. Just like just like we mentioned in Tariel's case, how Nisandarjan sent him to war where he almost died. Same thing happens here. Like she gives how much she is the thing. Like, but the man is like second, kind of also powerful man. But whatever, she gives command. She's even powerful than him in that sense. But neither he is kind of so weak. I mean, but here's what she tells him. Essentially, go for 3 years or something. Like, do you know just what and traveling these times? It's like it means 13 days or something like that. And search for that man and prove me your love that way. And basically, Aftandil is very happy, surprisingly. Like he has to go risk his life right now, but he's because he has a chance right now. Also, he gives a promise to be faithful to him and not marry other men and etc. while he's away. So that's what he does. He basically fabricates. He pretends that he is in near border territories, taking care of matters, and while leaves his trusted man in charge, while in reality and himself goes. And basically, this is where the journey begins, and this is how Aftandil and Tariel meet each other. Now, I won't explain the details of how they met because Aftandil first met basically Asmad, and he convinced Asmad to introduce himself to Tariel because otherwise they would just kill each other. Because Tariel is not saying his love essentially, and the fact that he cannot see the one he loves so dearly just destroys his soul. And there's also the thing of crying. There's a constant crying. And this is poetry, and we should have that in our mind when we mention that. Now, crying usually sometimes means actual crying, but sometimes it refers to the suffering that words can hardly describe. This is a basic kind of suffering they feel, and this is what the crying represents. This suffering, this basically this suffering that is very, very painful. So this is what crying is. And this is how basically, thanks to Asmat, these two meet each other. And basically, Aftandil hears Tariel's story. And for whatever reason, now between these two, Aftandil and Tariel is even more awesome. So, and for whatever reason, just like, well, this is how it represents. But in reality, the Aftandil is way more awesome and smart character generally, and a very smart person, prudent, etc. But he can, as an Aftandil, as a lover himself, he can feel because he'll risk his life of everything to come for this 3 years journey and Beryl found him. But he shares his suffering and he understands what he feels, and he decides to help him. But first he has to return, because if he won't return, people will think that he died in his 3-year journey, and it's only a couple months left. Or he will be considered as dead. So also he has to return and tell his lover everything. But eventually he does those things. He runs away from his kingdom because he cannot just leave. They kind of don't let him. So regardless of that, he runs because he says that I found my soul brother, I have to go. And basically, later he goes on his journey while Tariel is walking, killing fierce beasts and etc. And there is basically king of Mulghazanzar, Fridon, where he goes. Fridon is kind of friend of Tariel, and after that, what happens is that Aftandil is very smart. Basically, he beats the pirates on his way, and he pretends to be basically merchant. He goes in a city as a merchant, and basically there he finds this person, and I forgot her name right now. But he plays also a very important character because he eventually knows where Nisandarjan is. And what happens is that that person will fall in love with Aftandil, and Aftandil kind of gets angry at her at first, but later decides, okay, to go with that flow because he needs information, and she's the person that meets a lot of people here and will have that information. And what happens is that he kills a man for her, and later she tells him a story about Nisandarjan, and at the same time tells that she used to hide Nisandarjan from the eyes of the king, but her husband got drunk and told the king, her husband essentially gave him promise to, because without telling her husband, she could not take care of Nisandarjan, to never tell anyone about her because she was so beautiful, etc. But her husband broke the promise and still tells the king. And after that, she starts to hate and have her husband as a man. She stops having respect toward his husband as a man after he broke that promise. And she also kind of starts to hate. Doesn't have much of a love toward the children she has from this man. And that's why she sent this love letter to Aftandil, and it's a kind of the reason why Aftandil was angry because she was a married woman. But after that, he understands why she doesn't have any respect toward her husband. Did not have any respect toward her husband, and so it's also very interesting how she starts to hate her husband, etc., because of this broken promise. And you kind of can understand her suffering, and she had a legitimate reason, because her husband essentially got drunk, as come and broke the promise. Very betrayal, and very not something respectable behavior. And basically, the tissue gets sold of her. Now, the problem is that the Nisandarjan's whereabouts are in Kajeti Castle, and now these people are smart people. But here's the thing. First, Aftandil thought that they were some sort of mystical being, but he's still happy because he knows that they can. Basically, he's still more than happy to fight them. Basically, these are people that know no fear. And by the way, Aftandil himself, by the way, destroys pirates. He was alone. These people, the training and the strength of these people is no joke. And this is where this magician appears that can disappear in front of people's eyes. That goes in the prison where Nisandarjan is locked up and basically brings back information. And now 3 main heroes have huge war in Kajeti. Basically, imagine Kajeti as some sort of a castle of assassins or something like that, because these people are super well defended and numbers are huge and very well trained and etc. And they take around 300 men because the position of the Kajeti castle is situated in such a place that a small number but well-trained people are necessary. And there is another thing as well. But now we have 3 main heroes: Fridon, Tariel, and Aftandil. And they find, by the way, in that cave, just mentioned, with the weapons that are extremely the iron, so it's powerful, made by powerful iron, that are very strong and etc. Coincidentally, there is this 3 of this armor, and then 3 main heroes get them. Now, these people are ferocious, and especially Tariel, Aftandil, and Fridon. Fridon is also a king of Mulghazanzar, kind of small kingdom compared to mighty Arab and Indian empires. But now these people decide to choose 300 people. But even though they can call for, but if they wanted numbers, they could have called innermost forces. Like regardless of what happened, the Dariel is the king of all Indians, while Avtandil is second in charge. Basically, also not in directly second, but also is very super influential person. And also, her lover is a king. Okay, her woman, his woman, or basically his woman is a king of kings. So he could have just gone to Tina and told her that he did armies, and Tina would give him that armies. But they choose, and also Prino also can gather large more number of forces. But no, they don't do that. Why? Because they understand that if that war were to become long term, it would be difficult, and they could not basically sneak up to the enemy with the really close numbers. So that's why they choose around 300 people, because it's easy to sneak up to enemies without being noticed. If they are noticed, because the war will become complicated, because single cave connects them to this mighty castle, and these people are very well versed in science and etc. So their weapons are also very well made. Okay. So what happens is that these three heroes invade the castle. Basically, each take 100 men, and they basically they storm the gates. And what happens is that Dariel showed ridiculous amount of ferociousness there. Like you could see how people were split in half and etc. And how the doors were literally burst open. And he's obviously the first one that frees his lover. Basically, the ferociousness of that scene need to be read in Georgian or in Welsh version to understand. Like the scene was like bloody and ferocious. And three of the heroes survive, but I believe they lost 140 people in that battle. But now all the main events are kind of ended. That and next, by the way, king of basically Arabs help Indians because they are invaded by still enemies. So Indian army goes to support them, Dariel to return the King Empire, but they get it done without any fight because enemies are scared of this mighty army. Plus, Dariel still has an influence. It's not like entire India has collapsed, but some parts were invaded. So this is kind of end of this main story, and this is very unusual story. Oh, by the way, Dariel helps Avtandil because they went to get married to Tinatin because he negotiates with, as a mighty king of Hindus, he negotiates with, it basically tells the dead of Tinatin that hey, they love each other, etc. Because they're dead and still new. So this is what happens. So, but the Dariel does a huge favor to him, but to the point that he tells him that if I won't be able to make you marry your loved ones, since the favor you did me is more than the brother does to his brother, etc., I won't be husband of my wife. This is the serious promise he gives him, which is full seriousness. Like if I were to fail in that, I won't be like husband of my wife. This is a serious promise, by the way. And now about the philosophical side of the work a little bit. There's some very interesting saying there that now basically what is in the cup, like if we were to they mention this is a cup. Like whatever is in the cup will come out after you turn it upside down, right? It's a very philosophical thing, and you can see the author is very deeply philosophical and a super smart person. And I mean, come on, you're kidding me? To write something like this, from correct something like this beyond extreme. It's a poetry. 300 pages worth of poetry. Are you kidding me? Like to write something like to write something like this. Are you kidding me? Like. No. This is extremely challenging, and from correct standards. It's not very, very even probably beyond challenge of the difficulty of this challenge would be beyond extreme as well. But now the philosophical thing is that whatever is it within the person, like you give it the same thing will come as a liquid, right? Whatever is in the cup. Now. There is some notes. Let's see if I forgot to say something. Oh, this is one of the main points of Baeza. He criticizes. We can, by the other, like analyzing what happened. Like he kind of criticizes the love of Tariel and Nisandarjan because they kind of ruined the Indian kingdom by their stupidity. And Tariel's mostly at fault. And basically, it's not our time right now to judge that, but basically they do bad thing for entire India because they just cannot think smartly. They could have done a lot of things in much more smarter way to be together without all this suffering and etc. And at the same time, the right thing for India as well. But they don't act as rulers and people that are responsible. They act like they act as people that became lost their mind by their love. And by the letter from the Kajati, which she sends, is that like take care of India instead of wandering around, etc. But they're always good. Now there's at the same time the thing about enemies. There is no hatred in this world like the world Shota creates. Like the hatred is something like foreign. Like the evil people just have no way in this world. They're eventually the kindness wins, and like the world is ruled by justice mostly and friendship, and it's the very different from our world, obviously. And there's super like powers of these people, and at the same time like acts of kindness toward other people. It is and now it's very interesting what kind of culture used to grow in Georgia during that period, but obviously because of diseases, because of foreign invasions, etc., obviously that culture could not flourish, and we are unable to see what that culture could have offered. But regardless of that, it's very interesting, and also is that we definitely don't live in best of the worlds. Like we don't live in best world. And here's another thing. The approach about the life is that the life, there is a saying that our life is fairy tale, or no, not fairy tale, but dream, or some sort of like the zghapar is the Georgian word, and also that life is kind of fairy tale, and essentially it's like something like a dream, something like not a big of a value. There's also this philosophical thinking, which is also very interesting, which is a philosophical approach that life is just a fairy tale. Essentially, it's not something value of substance and something like that. So not to take basically life too seriously. And the end.